Greetings. In light of Black History Month, I decided to take it upon myself to delve into this clip right here, which is from an interview way back in the day, about 15, 16 years ago on 60 Minutes, where the host at the time, Mike Wallace, interviewed his guest, Morgan Freeman, who gave his own thoughts and perspectives on Black History Month and why they go completely against the liberal perspective, the liberal tidal wave, but most importantly, the liberal agenda in regards to Black History Month and how and why, for the most part, it's nothing more than a sham and an appeasement to Black people here in America. So we're going to delve into it here. And in addition, not this video, but a second video where he had a sit-down interview with Don Lemon on CNN. And in that clip, he's going to talk about racism and why it's being talked about so much. So we're going to get to that in due time, but we're just going to just start with this video right here. I'm going to chime in here and there with my 2 cents. Let's get it.
History Month you find
Ridiculous.
why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month?
Well,
You see how cut off he was by that question? He wasn't. You could tell by the look on his face that Mr. Wallace was not expecting that type of answer, especially from someone of such notoriety with the likes of Morgan Freeman. You see, I wanted to pause it right here because the way this whole thing went down is that when they see, I'm speaking of these liberals, particularly liberal Caucasian Jewish liberals, when they see a so-called Black person, particularly a so-called Black man like Morgan Freeman, who has his own who has his, for the most part, has a backbone. He has his own thoughts, his own perspectives, critical thinking skills, and who's not easily led. When you have those qualities and more, they view you as a threat, right? For the most part, that they can't use you. So for the most part, they either, if they can't outright take you out, they'll just pretty much cast you to the side, as to the point where you'd be considered almost an outcast. So that's something you have to, take note of.
Oh, come on, tell me.
well, I'm Jewish.
You always say your response to that question. You say, "I'm Jewish," which means, in other words, yeah, even though you Schwartzes refer to yourself as a skin color, we don't. So the joke's on you. But that's not the case for Morgan Freeman, though, as he's going to see right through the BS. Let's take a look.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
No,
Do you want one?
no.
No, all right, I don't either.
You see how definitive he was in his answer? All right. It's one thing for him to ask Morgan Freeman why he doesn't want a Black History Month. And he, for the most part, is just casual. But have the tables turned. And he asked the question, if you want a Jewish History Month, you see how defensive they get, right? And it just goes to show you again the nature of these people, right? They espouse these liberal, left-wing, downright Luciferian ideologies to the masses, particularly the Black masses within the Black community, that they themselves nor even their own children will adhere to. At the end of the day, it just shows you how phony, contradictory and hypocritical they are, which is why you can't take them seriously for the most part. Which is why it's basically a comedy of errors, right? All smoke and mirrors.
I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
Thank you, sir. And on top of that, it's also ancient history, particularly ancient biblical history, medieval history, colonial history, history from any and all time periods. That's how big our history really is.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it.
You see that? So his last offense in regards to him honestly getting owned at this point was him changing or shifting the conversation to racism. And this is what these liberals do, black and white liberals, right? Is that whenever they see anybody, particularly a black man who doesn't go along with the program, who doesn't fall for the okie doke, they automatically go to the racism angle because they know that for the most part, racism triggers black people. Now, is it speaking of all black people? No, of course not. But I would say a good majority of us. Yep, for the most part, it affects the majority of our people because of how, for the most part, many of us really just want that hug from the Caucasian man and woman. All right, so that's why oftentimes that's why they try to have these race talks, because it's just to keep the money flowing and keep the emoting going, especially around political season.
I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
You see that? That was a great response he said right there in regards to why it's in pretty much everyone's best interest to stop talking about racism, not because it's not an issue and of course it still exists, but the reason why is because when you're in your everyday goings in life, you should look at people you meet. You should look at who they are as a person, as people, how they treat them, how they treat you, with their kind, courteous, respectful, genuine, you know, honest, all types of traits that you want to see in a person and that they hope they see in you. So if I want to wind it back a little bit here, because I wanted to catch again what he says in its proper context. And the reason why I say that is because when he made the statement that he just made, he got in a little bit of trouble for that because it made it seem like that we should just stop talking about racism. That's not the case. So I'm just gonna play it right here from the climax.
Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman.
That's what he meant by that. Again, because you have to understand. On one hand, I agree that yes, you should look at somebody for who they are as a person, as opposed to just the color of their skin. At the end of the day, because anybody with good basic sense knows that terms like black, white, brown, red, yellow are not racist. They're just simply colors. The same colors that you find in an average crayon box. Those types of colors. That doesn't denote culture. It doesn't denote landmass. history, language, tradition, norms, values, beliefs, etc. It doesn't encapsulate any of that. So that's why these racial conversations, for the most part, go nowhere, because most people identify with that color coding system. So I agree with him on that standpoint. Now, where I have to kind of disagree is the fact that, yes, even though you may deal with somebody on an individual level, right, individual status, you have to understand that people, for the most part, are tribal, meaning what, that they're going to put their own people first, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. To be honest with you, it honestly is a problem when our people are always trying to be judged based on how society says that people should view us. But it should be more so on how we view ourselves and one another at the end of the day. That should make all the difference in the world. All right? Not what society says, because society, for the most part, don't really give 2 cents about our people at the end of the day. Only we should care. All right. But I don't want to go on too much longer for that. I just wanted to just cover that first clip. That was a well thought out, balanced statement by Mr. Freeman. Now we're going to go into part two now with Don Lemon.
The whole thing, especially the president and Democrats now are talking about income inequality, and that's basically what, when you talk about the richest 85 people on the planet, right?
Yeah.
It's income inequality. Do you think that's, looking at, what's happening in the news now, is that a good idea?
It's a great idea. It is the greatest idea. We have a much more vibrant society when we don't have such a vast chasm between the haves and the have-nots. We need that middle ground that we call the middle class, the people who buy everything, people who use the products that the rich are creating, if they're creating anything other than wealth, right? So it's what's happening with the Chinese economy right now. They're changing their whole outlook because they need consumers.
Yeah.
And without a middle class, you're not going to have consumers. You're not going to have it at the level that we normally would have it.
So,
Absolutely. Great point on that. Even though that part right here doesn't have too much to do with the conversation at hand, I just wanted to let it play all out because that's a very good point in regards to the middle class, because they're trying to break down the middle class, not just regards to consumerism, but in regards to the continuing war between the rich and the poor, to where you have both sides at each other's throats looking at each other with a negative eye because one group is doing better than the other and they look down on them, whereas the other group is struggling and they look down on those who are doing better than them and have more. And if they ain't doing enough for them. It's that type of relationship that breeds jealousy, envy, resentment, and downright hatred. That's something you have to be careful of. And I think this is something also that well-known economists, Arthur, and through his own admission, Marxist, Mr. Thomas Sowell, pointed out in one of his books, I think was called Intellectuals in Society. So that's something that we definitely need to remember, take heed of, and to not, not let yourself become influenced by, that mentality, that particular type of spirit.
So can I go back to, because I thought what you said was fascinating, because you called it bull when you said people can't pull themselves up. Do you think that race plays a part in wealth distribution, or either a mindset that you can't
Today?
or cannot? Yeah.
No,
You don't.
no, I don't. I don't. You and I, we're proof. Why would race have anything to do with it? Put your mind to what you want to do and go for that. It's kind of like religion to me. It's a good excuse for not getting there.
You know, I said,
That's a very great point too, because nowadays it is like a religion, where any level of discrepancy or anything that goes remotely wrong in your life, we automatically want to blame it on racism, right? Like things like institutional, systemic racism, things like that. It's like, I'm not going to say that racism, for the most part, doesn't exist anymore, because it still does, and everybody with a sharp mind knows that, right? But to make every single thing about race, it just takes away all of its power and its potency. It's like you take away. It's like you have a snake, right? And if all the venom is taken out of the snake, all that potency is gone, right? It's not considered a threat anymore. Same thing with racism. There was a time when you would just call somebody a racist, and that would actually have true, legit meaning and merit, and it was actually something that was serious. But nowadays, that whole term racism is just being tossed around willy nilly, to the point it's lost a lot of its esteem, man. And like it says, it has become a religion for the most part. Now, in regards to what he stated, in regards to him and Don Lemon being examples of his success, and both of them are a success. But if you have to be honest for me, you have to be real. It ain't just because of hard work, determination, persistency, commitment, consistency, focus, and things like that. Yeah, you have all those things, and they're all needed, especially talent. Yeah, you need all those things to make it like in the world, particularly in Hollywood. But let's be honest, and let's be real. Uh, the number one thing that both you two and others had to do to get to where you're at is sign your name on a dotted line and sell your soul away to the devil. All right, that's the reason. That's the number one reason why people like yourselves are at the top where you're at, and why you continue to be where you're at, because of all these downright uh, satanic rituals that you have to adhere to behind closed doors. All right, so we gotta so we have to be all the way honest here.
and it's probably get me in trouble, but I said to some of my colleagues recently, so I know that it's an issue, but it seems like every single day on television, I'm talking about race, and it's because of the news cycle. It's in the news, but sometimes I get so tired of talking about it. I want to just go, this is over. Can we move on?
And if you talk about it, it exists.
Right.
Hey, you hear that? Man, Don Lemon basically just let the cat out the bag in regards to why there's all this continuous race talking and this race mongering, race baiting in the media, because he basically just admitted that he took what could be considered backroom conversation and just brought it out to the forefront in regards to why there's all this talk about race, because it's in the news cycle, and that's not by accident. That's on purpose, especially when you have a lot of these race stories put in the media that, for the most part, is incomplete. All right, it's not all the way complete on the who, what, where, when, how, why aspect. It just put out certain race stories just to get black people all angry, pissed off, and emotional. So that way, especially when the voting season comes around the corner, it just you know it just has our people all geared up just to go in those voting lines and those voting booths and continuously vote Democrat to keep us on that Democratic plantation. And we wonder why we don't get anywhere. And you wonder why things, for the most part, don't change, but yet continue to get worse.
It's not like it exists and we refuse to talk about it, but making it a bigger issue than it needs to be is the problem we have.
So
It's so that's it, pretty much there for the most part. Because a great strong way to end that. Because hey, I give props to Don Lemon here as he himself just stated to why there's all this continuous race mongering. All right, but at the same time, I mean, my man, bruh, if you if you really feel that way, if you feel that there's too much race talking in the media, not just on CNN, but also other left wing media outlets, which is the case, then my man, then why are you still on CNN, man? I mean, for the most part, I mean, why are you still having these race talks if you really feel that way? Or maybe you're just being disingenuous on one hand, but on the other hand, I shouldn't say it too much. I think the reason why, even though he knows that this all this race talk, it's the issue, right? You know the reason why it's to continuously happen. It's to continue happening, but yet you're still a part of it. You see, it just goes to show you, man, that oftentimes a lot of our people don't really know how they feel about this whole racial aspect in regards to the hate, or particularly love-hate relationship that they have with Caucasians, right? You don't know whether or not you really love them. You don't know whether or not you really hate them, whether you want to come together with them or do you want to separate from them. All right. That's why, for the most part, it causes a mental disorder amongst our people and other people as well in the society. All right. But anyway, that's a wrap for this video. I thought this video interview was just as insightful as the first one, and that it was a really video, balanced interview. And I thought overall, from my perspective, I thought it was Don Lemon's best interview. That's basically throughout his whole career. All right. But anyway, that's a wrap. I'm out.